Got 10 seconds.
You are now live here.
4, 2, 1. Okay, well, welcome to the show, everybody. Kufar Akbar. Welcome to another edition of the Crescent discussion group. We are here every Sunday at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time, and that would be 5 p.m. Eastern Time and 2 p.m. Western. What do they call that? West Coast Time? What is that called? Mountain Time? Not Mountain Time. Pacific. There we go. Pacific, because it's on the Pacific Ocean. There you go. I just think I would have been able to remember that detail. Well, welcome to the show, everybody. I appreciate everybody coming, and I glimpsed over the chat. We have people pouring in the chat here, coming into the chat, and I appreciate the remarks that are being made over here. Best Dragon, best intro ever. I agree. It is the best intro ever, and that intro is from
the mastermind, and I put it together.
The
mastermind, you. Hey, did that sound okay on y'all's end?
Yeah,
because it sounded cheap.
Well, I mean,
it sounds like it's been filtered or something.
Yeah, it sounds good.
Okay, it must be my side.
Yeah. Okay, so last week we talked about all of this nonsense here. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 pages of nonsense about Hamza Mayet at Speaker's Corner. And, sometimes when you prepare for show, sometimes you go overboard and you spend way too much time trying to analyze what he's saying, analyze the video, things of that nature, or going in there and trying to develop rebuttals to what they're saying, and going in and researching the Hadith, the Quran verses, and this, that, and the other. And, I was going to do a part 2 this week. And if you still want to do a part 2, we can. I wanted to actually do this slideshow because I had this prepared last week of reasons why, and I developed this slideshow, why I'm not a Muslim, after listening to this clown. After listening to this guy, I cannot see or understand why anybody would ever want to embrace the Islamic faith. I really could not, because of the way that he treats people, the way that he talks down to people. It's just for somebody who, and maybe this is an Eastern thing. If you talk to, I remember Adam Seeker came on here when he first started doing YouTube videos and going on and developing YouTube videos and such. And he was on here, and I can't remember who we had on. It was a Muslim. And he laid into this guy. And I mean, he laid into him with a vengeance. And I called him on, I think it was on Facebook Messenger or whatever, and we had about I don't know, an hour discussion. So I'm like, I told him, I said, I want you to come to the show whenever you can, because I love what he has to say. The guy is a wealth of knowledge, a true blessing, a great example of what somebody can do with their life once they leave Islam. But I told him, dude, you got to tone it down a bit. I mean, you need to really. He goes, you don't understand, brother. This is the only thing that these guys respond to is when you talk to them this way, because they're going to treat you this way. And the argument is not made based on the merits of the discussion, but it's the way that you present it and the way that you present yourself. And, I thought about that, and I when I view videos on YouTube and I listen to some of the way that these arguments are made, yeah, I think he's spot on with that. But here in the West, we're not used to engaging people so aggressively. We're used to more of a more stoic type conversation, more intellectual, more cerebral, with fact for fact, whereas theirs is about trouncing you. So after watching Hamza last week, I can see where he's been hanging out with the wrong type of people and following the wrong prophet who's inspired his heart and his soul to treat people like that. So I sat back and I kind of analyzed and said, well, why am I not a Muslim? But why would I never be a Muslim to begin with? And it's not necessarily because of the people. There are some reasons because of the people and some of the people that we see and we have to interact with here and in other social media platforms. But it's because of the content. So what I want to do is I want to go through a slideshow that I threw together, which is the top 10 reasons why I'm not a Muslim. And I don't want to sound like David Letterman here, because we all remember David Letterman's top 10 of this, top 10 of that. But it's kind of like that. So let's go ahead without further ado. Where did it go? Of course, I do not have this brought up, and I'm not prepared once again, which is okay. No, it's not okay. Okay, so this is actually this picture is from Ibn Warwick's book, Why I'm Not a Muslim. If you ever get a chance to read his book, where do I have it? I just had it here. Oh, where'd it go? I just had it. Wait a minute, I'll find it. Here it is. Okay. This one right here. I'm sorry. Let me bring this up here. The Origins of the Quran. This is a mandatory read if anybody needs it. I got his other book up here somewhere. I'd have to go find it. But anyway, he's a great author, and he does a great job of explaining or providing apologetic or polemic against Islam. Okay, so top 10 reasons why this guy is not a Muslim. Number one, treatment of women. The treatment of half of the world's population. When we look at, and this is an often made argument by a certain individual from Houston saying, I love this topic. I love defending Islam. No, you don't. It's because you purposely disregard what's going on across the globe, what is written in your own sources, and then try to finesse them into some westernized, salient, acceptable version of it. The fact of the matter is that the hadith tell us that women are thought to be mentally deficient. Women make up the majority of people. Hell, this is according to the last prophet of God, of Allah. He said that the majority, when he looked into hell, the majority of them were women. A lot of times women are forced to go through genital mutilation. And we had an entire show. Did we not have an entire show on this a couple years ago?
I've done one myself, yeah.
And the absolute horror that is enforced upon little girls in this is just,
it's not just little girls. It's young. It's adult women as well.
Yeah, well, as a punishment.
No, it's not even as a punishment. A lot of times, And then the vast, disgusting range of what FGM means is mind-numbing.
Well, and the purposes behind it. It's just,
Yeah.
Okay. So that in of itself is a no-go. Where did I go?
Go back to share.
I know I did it again. Hold on. I got to go through this whole mess again. Okay. Sorry. Let me get this off my screen. Let me do it again. I got to remind myself not to hit a certain button, and I don't know why. I don't know why it did it that time.
I've had that.
You
know, the part about the women being mentally deficient, apparently the idiot who came up with these things didn't work with intelligent women, or he just thought he was smarter. I just don't think he was very smart is what it came down to.
Well, when we look at let me see if this does it again. Well, okay, when we look at ancient cultures, for example, first century Judaism, what was the testimony of women? The value of the testimony of women was not that of a man. Now, when we see the early church developing, we start seeing women, because women were not even allowed to go into the what they call that at the temple. It's the inner sanctum of the not the Holy of Holies, of course, but that area right outside the Holy of Holies, where it was only men were only allowed to go there. And they, of course, when we look at the testimony of women in the first century Judaism, so we see that, but we see Christianity almost immediately, especially if you go to Acts chapter 2, where you see women taking an active role and being trusted in our faith system. Here we don't have that. We don't have that at all. Okay, so let's go back to this. Women's testimony is only half of that of a man. We see women are not able to file for divorce, where men, all they have to do is just, give what do they call it, the triple talaq. I divorce you, I divorce you. Women are not allowed to leave their homes without a close male relative. Now, this is a big one, especially in 2023. Here you have a rule that was formulated.
They have to have permission at the very least.
But according to the Sharia, if I'm not mistaken, it's in the Sharia. It says that women are not allowed to
not without an escort.
Yeah, without a close male relative. And it's codified, if I'm not mistaken, in either in the Quran or in the Hadith itself. So there is Quranic and Sahih Hadith affirmation of this. And to think about that, I mean, how do you just shut down somebody's life based on their gender? Who knows? Okay, next we have commands men to beat their wives if they fear disobedience. Now, notice that not if they are disobedient. The Quran says if they fear disobedience. So there's a big difference.
So beat them before they do anything wrong.
Right. This is like that movie with Tom Cruise, whether it was Pre-Crime. What was that called?
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm.
It's called Minority Report. Minority Report.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same. The guy who wrote the Android's Dream of Sheep. The Blade Runner. It's the same author.
I didn't set the time on Blog Talk. I upload the audio anyway. Sorry. What was the name of that movie, Isa? You said that he wrote also what?
Minority Report. Minority Report.
Yeah, but I mean, would you say he also wrote?
Blade Runner.
Oh yeah. Okay. Oh, that was a good movie. It's showing our ages. Well, Isa, you're probably a movie buff and know all these things anyway. But okay, so to beat their wives. So just think about that. So, and when you beat your wife, if you beat your wife here in the United States, you know what you don't get to do? You don't get to own a firearm. That's according to the Lautenberg Amendment, where too many men were going out and purchasing guns and going home and killing. It's not funny, but they were purchasing guns and then going out and shooting their wives or their girlfriends or whatever, or stalking them with firearms. So they said, okay, if you commit domestic violence against your wife, against a woman, you're not allowed to own a firearm. And if you're not allowed to own a firearm, guess what else you can't do? You can't join the military. And if you're in the military, guess where you go? You go outside of the military. Should that suffice to the church to stop? What is this here? What is this? Except that we share the same God. Why is it not clear that Islam is an imposter and they've gone through history in order to survive? I agree 100%. We don't share the same God. The God of the Bible would not tell you to go home and beat your wife if you think that if you fear that.
If that was the case, God would beat you if he thought you were going to do something wrong. Because we're supposed to be the bride of Christ. That would give Christ the right to beat us every time he thought we were going to sin.
Oh, that's a good
scary
point. That is a good point.
I don't want to be there. That's too freaky.
Okay. So the treatment of women, number 10, why I'm not a Muslim. Number 9, my wife. I'm kind of surprised. Well, oh, your wife? What, your wife keep you from being as Muslim? Is your wife a devout Christian? All these things? No. Well, yeah. I mean, she's a Christian. She's a strong Bible-believing Christian woman, good godly woman. But that is not exactly why. And it's the relationship between men and women. For an example, I can't imagine trying to, for example, in Islam, you could have 2, 3, 4 wives. I can't imagine loving, and this is the requirement. You're supposed to love and treat each of the wives equitably. I can't imagine
2, 3, and 4, which is actually 9. So you can have up to 9.
Well, I can't imagine having 2, and I can't imagine providing treatment for the same way that I treat my wife. I couldn't imagine loving 3 different women the same way, 4 women, whatever.
Yeah.
When we think of what polygamy is, it's essentially a lie invented to satisfy the sexual lusts of men who don't know the first thing about commitment or what a biblical marriage is and what God wants for our lives. This is similar to having 72 virgins in heaven. Why would you need 72 virgins in heaven, would you say? What's the purpose of that? Well, it's to satisfy your lust or to give men some type of motivation. Oh, well, I want to go to heaven. There was a guy that recently, he was an older gentleman. This was just in the news. I don't know if it was on Jihad Watch, Paul, sorry, or where it was from, but I heard this on the news that he was a Muslim and then had converted to Christianity and was a practicing Christian for a number of years. And then right before, as he got really old, right before he died, he converted back to Islam. And the reason why he converted back to Islam is because he said he wanted his virgins in heaven.
Oh, wow.
True story.
Well,
Can't imagine his reward.
What's that?
Well, I still think of that as a minuscule reward, because the truth of the matter is the Quran never mentions heaven. It mentions gardens. So what do you get? You get a garden with olives. Think about it.
What though?
Hori, olives.
Grapes. Oh, there we are.
Virgin olives. And if you look at that description of what hori are, and you consider that a human, something's wrong with your head.
Well, there's a tradition that, and I didn't know this until I had read a book. It was Amazon. What do you call them? Online books. What do they call them?
The ebooks.
Yeah, Kindle books.
Kindle.
Right.
Yes, sir.
And it was called the Mosque of Notre Dame. And in the Mosque of Notre Dame, it sets the story is set in Paris, France, after an Islamic majority, because there's an Islamic majority now in France, and since there's an Islamic majority, they enforce Sharia law, and in the course of it, they convert the church of Notre Dame. No, it's not the church. Cathedral Notre Dame. What do they call it?
Cathedral.
Cathedral Notre Dame. Okay, they convert the cathedral into a mosque. And it goes on to explain where this hoary legend came from. And they're actually supposed to be demons.
Yes.
Because once you think about this, for all of eternity, your job is to satisfy and continue to satisfy this supernatural being. And after a while, if this is all you're doing, that's going to become boring. And now it's going to become more of a way to terrorize you and to torment you based on your carnal lust that you thought would be great on earth, but now they're transferring that to the angelic realm and to the supernatural realm. And now it's no longer a pleasure. Now it is a way to terrorize you and to.
Well, I've always found the term hoary amusing because you first hear it in Greek mythology, and then it transfers into Islam. To me, that makes another statement of Gnosticism. But yeah,
you're right. Absolutely right. Okay, that's too much. Maybe
the houris are definitely not pretty in Greek mythology.
No, they have like translucent skin or something. You can see their bones, or
well, those are the ones in Islam. The ones the ones in
bone marrow. You can see the bone marrow.
Yeah, that's
although
the Islam
bone marrow is tasty, I don't find it sexy. I'm just saying. Me, but
it's so gross.
Red? No.
No, bone marrow is great. You never have bone marrow, dude? No, seriously. Down with your butter. Pour that on a steak, man. Oh God, you are talking heaven, dude.
So you think the girls will be tasty in that respect?
No, that's just so not sexy. So not sexy.
Okay, let's go back over to the slideshow. All right, so and then when we start thinking what a biblical marriage is, God lays it out in Genesis 2:24. This is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united in his wife, and the two become one flesh. It doesn't say
exactly.
It doesn't say that more than two. It doesn't say three. It doesn't say four. It doesn't say five or whatever. It's one flesh, and that's number 9. Why I would never be a Muslim, or why I'm not a Muslim. All right, my faith. I love my faith. I love my Jesus. I love my God. And when we start thinking about our faith, the faith that I have is not predicated on impossibilities, not predicated on something like, I don't know, the last word of God given to mankind has Alexander the Great traveling so far west that he finds out where the sun sets, and you never guess where it sets. Well, of course,
a pool of muddy water.
A pool of muddy water. There it is for everybody to see. And what is amazing, here's what's truly amazing, is when you engage people on this verse, they always want to say it says, well, as if. And if you look at some translations, there are some translations. I'm not sure if Yusuf Ali says that or which one, but there are translations that does say as if it is setting in a muddy pool of water, when that's not what it says at all. And to back that up, we also have hadith where Muhammad again doubles down on this, where a guy asks him, Muhammad asks him, "Oh, do you know where the sun sets?" And the guy responds, "Well, only the apostle of."
But it's Allah who's telling the story. That's the thing. It's Allah saying this. It's not anybody else. It's Allah giving this statement. So that's what makes it most humorous to me. Allah doesn't know.
Yeah, doesn't know where the sun sets. Yeah, and it doesn't understand. But it also talks about in the verse where it talks about something else that is tangible. That there's a people that lived around that area.
Yeah.
And I actually did a show on Radio Free Kafiristan one week, trying to raise money to sell that property right there where those people work. And I was trying to get bids that, hey, you can sit there and watch the sunset in this muddy pool every afternoon and every evening. Nobody called the show. I don't know if anybody listened to the show or not.
Oh, you silly cappers. Don't you know it's a scientific fact? Dude, NASA has proven it. They sent Neil Armstrong to the moon, and that they found that the sun does indeed set in a spring of muddy water. They're just concealing it from you, hiding the truth because they are enemies of Islam, and they don't want you to know. Don't you know that?
You
Don't forget, Islamic science overrides every other thing of knowledge.
You know, now that you mentioned that, I've been kind of dipping my toe back into the discussion groups on Facebook as of late, and somebody had actually posted something very similar to that today
I
about
believe it.
NASA confirming that there's I don't know.
Neil Armstrong had to make a public statement. I think it was after 9/11, saying, "No, this is not true. I am not a Muslim. I was born a Methodist, and I'm going to die a Methodist, thank God," or something like that. NASA, on its public website, where they do questions and answers, they get asked this question all the time. You can go to it, and they say, "Is it true?" They always start with, "Isn't it true that NASA discovered?" They give the Quran verse. And they say, "Isn't this true that NASA has proven this? That NASA scientists prove this?" And NASA scientists chimed in and said, "We're not going to talk about your religious belief, but no, there are cracks in the moon. But no, they are they're millions of years old. Okay." And blah blah. I mean, no, seriously,
Nobody split the moon, right? And there's I've seen articles on that where NASA found where the moon was split. We've actually found the mark.
Yeah.
No, we haven't.
Well,
if you split a planet, for crying out, if you split a planet, how are you going to ever put that back together?
It's Allah's miracle, don't you know?
I know. Okay, you can say it's a miracle. That's fine. But okay, now Muslims aren't the only one that do that in some of these groups, because I've read that there was somebody posted an article that, didn't you know that NASA's found Joshua's missing day or something like that. And oh yes, it's right here where the NASA scientists has gone back and they've calculated the number of days, and there was a day missing, and that day is Joshua's day. And it's not true. And every religious group does this, but we see it more often, I think. And I think Christians, knowing that this is never necessary to demonstrate the validity or the veracity of our faith.
Well, what's funny, the thing that I find funny is that they have to appeal to the Kufr scientists. You know what I mean?
I still think the Allah's cracked moon was Allah bent over and everybody saw the cracked moon.
There you go. There you go. Well,
we got mooned, right? Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Let's
all right. Okay, we're getting carried away. I'm sorry. Okay. Okay. So something like the moon. Here we go. Get me off of that. The sun setting in a pool of water. And when we also find a hadith where Muhammad legitimizes or authorizes the raping of women captives to satisfy the carnal lust of his men. Here you have somebody who's supposed to be a prophet. They've just sacked a village. They've captured men and their wives, and now they're dividing the men from their wives. And the Muslim men are having a hard time deciding, well, I mean, just as soon as you capture a village, the first thing that you want to, that you have to make up your mind is, which women can we rape? Don't you see? This is the example that is set here. This is the sunnah. Which women are authorized to be raped? Which women are forbidden? And Muhammad turns around and says, it doesn't matter if their men are alive or not. Your right hand possesses them. They are yours. So here you have, by virtue of conquering somebody, you dissolve marriages. These are marriages. Marriages, let's say they're Christian marriages. Marriages between, this is a covenantal relationship between a man and a woman ordained by God. And you get to be the arbitrator of whether or not that marriage is valid or not. That
is in the Sharia, it is in the Quran, it is in Hadiths. So people, I mean, no matter where you think it, that's what it says.
Yeah, and it's all over the place. And I don't want to spend the entire show on it. And we could do a whole show on it, but it's that in itself right there is a good. I mean, that right there tells me, I would never bow to Mecca because of that. Treat another human being that way. Think that little of a human being. Okay, let's get back to this. Okay, let's see here. face a location that did not exist when its supposed prophet was supposed to live there. Okay, we went through this. What was this? 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, where we talked about Mecca. We talked about the number one proof from Islamic apologists of locating Mecca. It wasn't whether or not Mecca, all the arguments for Mecca, because there aren't any. It wasn't any of the archaeological evidence for it. It wasn't any of the manuscript evidence for it. It wasn't any of the geographical evidence for it. It wasn't any of the cartographical evidence for it. It was Ptolemy, who was the curator of the Alexandrian Library in the late first century, early second century, makes a reference to a place called Makaraba, which, according to his own coordinates, longitude and latitude, places Makaraba east of Medina, where Mecca today, if it was supposed to be Mecca, sits west. There's no archaeological evidence for this place. There's no mention of it anywhere in pre-existent literature. And the only time that Makaraba is ever mentioned is this one time by Ptolemy. It's not mentioned by anybody else. So if this place is supposed to be this 4,000-year-old city where Abraham and Ishmael supposedly built this Kaaba, there would be some evidence for it. And there's not. So to sit there and dictate to people to say, well, you need to your Qibla, you need to bow 5 times a day in this direction to this city, to this cube with this rock inside of it that didn't exist at the time that it supposedly was you're ordered to face it. I think it was 629 when he changed the Qibla. I might be wrong on that. It doesn't matter. But when they changed the Qibla from Jerusalem, they turned it to Mecca. Well, if that city does not exist, why are you facing that direction? Also, I might add, by the way, there is no Qibla in the early Islamic mosques for the first 100 years after the death of Muhammad that face Mecca. None.
Yes.
Now,
I would say it's the first 100 years, and that. Thank you.
Yeah, and if there is, then what we would like to see is what you demand from Christians is some type of evidence for it, some type of archaeological evidence that demonstrates that Qibla, there were people who did face that direction and pray in that direction. And
we don't need anything for Christianity about what direction to face because God takes us where we're at. He doesn't care what direction we face.
Well, there are Christian traditions that do require, they don't mandate it, but they do practice facing Jerusalem as part of their prayer. And I don't want to say it's the Coptics, or I can't remember which one.
It's Eastern Orthodox, I believe.
That very well may be it. But even with that, we know Jerusalem existed in the 1st century. We know Jerusalem existed in the 5th century BC. We know it existed 1000 BC. Why? Because we have evidence for it. We have archaeological evidence. We have manuscript evidence. We have cartographical evidence. We have geographical evidence. We have all these things that require somebody to actually believe something that I have right here, where I say it is not a blind faith, and it is predicated on evidences and not impossibilities.
Are you saying you're not required to throw your brain out with your faith?
Right. You don't have to check your brain at the door. And I did a presentation one night at the church, and part of the presentation is I read from 2 Opinions chapter 3, verse 6, where it says, "Thou when enters into the house of the Lord, when thou enterest into, thou mustest remove thy brain and place it in the basket and only hold it there until." And I went through this whole thing making it sound like it was, old Elizabethan scripture, but it's from the book of 2 Opinions, and there's no such thing as a book of 2 Opinions. Nobody got it. It's kind of like,
no, we got it. We got it.
But that's okay. Nobody gets my jokes anyway. Okay, I'm trying to get my phone to quit ringing in my ear. Okay. Yes, you are.
Darcy wrote, "Has anyone seen the jumping cow?" I think you're talking about the bright yellow cow.
The bright what?
The bright yellow cow that's missing in Surah 2.
No, I thought it was the one that jumped over the moon.
Oh, okay.
Maybe
the drum
right.
I'm guessing that's the bright yellow cow because it still hasn't been found.
Yeah, that cow picked the moon, which made it break.
I diddle diddle, the cat in the fiddle.
The cow jumped over the moon.
That sounds like poetry. I mean, of course, Muhammad was better than the best 5 poets according to Hamza last week. And so I diddle diddle, the cat in the fiddle, the cow jumped over the moon. I mean, you can't get any more beautiful and profound than that. There's your verse like it.
Dr. Seuss is better than anything in the Quran, dude. Seriously.
But green eggs and ham.
Well, you know what?
Yeah.
The truth is that at least, I would say most Dr. Seuss has parabolic. I'm saying the wrong terminology. It's parables, a lot of it. So yes, it's much stronger and of greater value. Yes.
Well, let me correct that. Unwoke Dr. Seuss. Remember, they woke Dr. Seuss, and they're now editing it out. Yeah. So,
I didn't know they've done that. Yeah.
Yeah, they did that a couple years ago. They're also doing now Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. There are no longer any fat people. The Oompa Loompa are transgender. The Oompa Loompa are non-binary. I am serious. I'm 100% serious. They're no longer fat kids.
The Oompa Loompas.
The Oompa Loompas are non-binary or trans. No more fat kids. So that kind of ruins the whole scene where the fat kid gets, because they can't stop eating the chocolate and falls in and gets sucked up the tube and gets stuck. So you got to cut that out. No, they seriously they've totally woke. Yeah. So
yeah,
go buy a copy of Unwoke Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and in a couple decades it'll be worth a lot of money. Seriously.
You should definitely cover that Nonius comment on temporary marriage.
I didn't even think of that. I mean, when you're thinking of so many reasons why you're not a Muslim, I mean, that is one of them, right? Yeah, temporary marriages. We had I'm not going to get into it.
We get a care director here. Engaging in that in the United States.
So
that's the thing. That guy that he debated David Wood a number of years ago. He's been on Shibley. Yeah, he's been on this show. We've had him on 2 or 3 times. Nadir Ahmed, and my understanding, I might be wrong, and if I'm wrong, I'm going to make my public apology right here and now. But they were saying that he had actually had participated in one of these muta marriages.
Yeah, so on that, I'm the one that went to the Peoria courthouse and got the divorce papers, and it actually, seriously, I drove all the way out there from Chicago to Peoria. I was there for business or something. I'm like, I'm going to swing by the Peoria courthouse because Nadir was attacking. I forgot David Wood, or his sidekick who's now gone with the Lord. What's his name? I can't think of his name. Nadir. Yeah. Anyways, I'm like, okay, we're gonna find out about this. So, but no, it did say that his ex-wife testified that he got married in New York temporarily with this other chick, and he said it's okay because it's a temporary marriage. It's perfectly Islamic. So he basically committed bigotry. Okay. Or no, not bigotry.
That was when he was a Muslim. You're saying
bigamy.
Bigamy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that part of his track can testify to that. Yeah. I'm the one who did that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, all right. I remember hearing it.
This was I think we're talking about somebody different then.
No.
I know who you're talking about. You're talking about the guy with the care in Florida.
That's Hassan Shibley, is what I'm thinking of.
That's who you're. Yeah, I know who you're. I know exactly who you're.
Yeah, he got caught. Hassan Shibley got caught.
Well, but here's the thing. I think, to be fair, we have to put this in perspective. So the temporary marriage, okay, that really is a Shia thing. Hold on, let me preface that. That's a Dr. Musk. that is a Shia thing, okay? In that you can marry up for an hour or a half hour, 45 minutes, whatever, okay? I can tell you a story about that because I used to date this Shia girl. She was a Iraqi refugee from the first Gulf War, but that's another story. Anyway, but the Sunni, they have this thing called It's called Traveling Wife, where they can literally come. They come here to school. They marry some, local girl. Okay, have sex. They can have kids, whatever. And as soon as their visa's up, they graduate. They go home and they just kind of leave her, and that's that. But then you also have the nightmare stories where they're like, no, why don't you come and stay in, some dung bunk town, Arabia or wherever. And all of a sudden she becomes a prisoner because they take away her passport and she can't get out. So you do have that opposite story. But most of the cases, they just leave the chick and that's pretty much it. But now, there is one thing you guys did not discuss, and I'm sorry for taking so long on this. My favorite part of Islam is the breastfeeding 5 times in order to work with your coworker. That I am in favor of. I mean, because no, there are times in the office we run out of coffee creamer. You know what I'm saying? I mean,
All right. Okay.
seriously.
All right. Okay. I get it. I get it, Rad.
We can put it to good use. I'm just saying.
It sounds to me that you ought to go convert and do Kamuka yourself.
No, because I can't have bacon. That's coffee creamer, bacon.
Yeah, but it's only temporary, isn't it? Is it not? Isn't it temporary where you don't have to?
No, they really crack down on it.
Okay. All right. Okay. So my faith teaches me, or it requires proof. You have to have some type of legitimate proof in order to be a Christian. And here with Islam, not so much. And then also a sense of morality. When we think of the example for the Sunnah, of whose Sunnah that we're supposed to follow, I mean, we follow somebody that is God incarnate. That's kind of a hard example to follow. However, we are all commanded to be Christ-like, and we are to try to be Christ-like, even though we fail every single days of our lives. That is the example that we're to follow. Whereas
I think
in Islam, give me just a second, Paul, and then I'll hand it over to you. But in Islam, where you think of the moral failings of Muhammad, then this isn't this guy saying this. This is where you just go to their sources, their own sources, that spell out that he had committed adultery, that he committed rape, that he enslaved people, that he murdered people, that he stole. All of these things, all of these failings of his life are considered examples to follow. Now, there are 100 million different qualifiers they use. Well, because, he did this because, or we should do this because, or it isn't all. No. You follow that example here in the United States, you follow that Sunnah here in the United States, and you're going to go to jail. You will find yourself in jail, in prison, for some of the most heinous things, because this is what this guy did. And we'll be talking about that here in just a bit. Okay, Paul, I'm sorry.
Say the big difference between Christianity, Judeo-Christian belief structure, and the Islamic belief structure. We believe that we are made in God's image, that he is able to influence our knowledge of good and evil from the point of creating us. And they don't believe that. They believe a messenger has to be sent. Well, if you've had, that's what it says in the Sharia, there has to be a messenger sent. And if there's no messenger sent, because the last one he's not getting up from the grave. So we have free reign. According to them,
we have free reign. We can do what we want. Is that
basically? Because if there's no messenger sent, there's no penalty.
Wow.
That's unless you look at the other added stuff that they added after they wrote Sharia.
Doesn't make any sense in the world. Okay. Yeah. Some of the beliefs that, especially when you get into the Sharia and start reading through that, we've done enough shows on Sharia here to revisit all of that. Okay, so I am an abolitionist. And what I mean by an abolitionist is that I am against, and always have been and always will be, against slavery. I'm kind of like the Frederick Douglass. When we look at Frederick Douglass, he was a Christian and an abolitionist. I would just want to make this point. The abolitionist movement was a Christian movement. It was grown out of the Second Great Awakening, where people started to believe that we needed to, it was incumbent upon us to improve the conditions on lives around the people that lived around us. And it was the faith, it was our faith that taught us to do these things. So the abolitionist movement was a Christian movement. William Lloyd Garrison, another abolitionist. He was a little crazy because he thought they should go out and kill all people who practiced slavery, but he was an abolitionist himself. Of course, Sojourner Truth, abolitionist. John Brown, abolitionist, even though he was a murderer himself. He thought he was doing God's work, but he was an abolitionist. Martin Luther King was an abolitionist. And strongly believed in the equitable treatment of all human beings. However, when we look at their example to follow, Muhammad enslaved people. They would purposely go to war and enslave human beings, mainly women, and sell them and exchange them in amongst themselves and their warriors. And he was a slave owner. He owned slaves. This is all part of the hadith. This is not me making this up. And he was a slave trader. Muhammad was not an abolitionist. And what really baffles me is people like from the Nation of Islam. There we go. I couldn't think of it off the top of my head. The Nation of Islam. How can you sit there with a straight face and condemn Christianity for slavery? There are parts of Christianity and Christians that did practice slavery. There's no doubt about that. But it's a universal condemnation of Christians where there is no self-reflection on their part, looking at the founder of their faith system, which is actually, it's not Muhammad from the 7th century. It's that Wally Fard guy from the 1920s.
Well, they still think Muhammad was a black dude. they don't read the hadith.
Yeah, well, and that's this is true. David Wood actually did a really good video on that a number of years ago. Where
the one on Muhammad Ali, I thought was the best.
It was on Muhammad Ali, and Cassius Clay was a ardent. He was against, or he's for civil rights, or one of I can't remember exactly which.
Yeah, well, Cassius Clay was an abolitionist.
Okay. So he's an abolitionist, and
he was named
after an abolitionist, and then he changes his name
to a
Muhammad,
to a guy who enslaves people.
Right, and then Ali, who abused slaves, it's in the hadith that he abused a female slave. It makes zero sense. But this is, when we look at this, it's mainly a racial thing for the Nation of Islam. It's kind of like when we had them on here a couple months ago, the Black Hebrew Israelites. Who is this? Look at here. Look at who's here. Oh, hey. They're Connie, look who's here. Let's see. After this time, you still full of hate, lie about Islam, preach hate. I challenge you to quote me, unquote. Okay, the verse from the Bible where Jesus forbids slavery. As much as you would like to make this about Christianity today, Aladdin, it's not. It's all about Islam. It's all about why I would never practice your faith. But I'll be more than happy to talk to you about.
So I want to give another name, a great abolitionist, William Wilberforce. And Aladdin, you are in England, so I suggest you pick up his book called Radical Christianity. You might get your eyes opened.
There's actually a movie called Amazing Grace about him too.
Yes, I've seen that.
Yes.
No, wait a second. What was he talking about? Chris, I challenge you. Chris isn't here.
I think he meant Eric. But I think
Eric.
the interesting question is about this is that a really good position to take? Like if you're, do you want to throw Jesus under the bus if you're like a Muslim? I don't think you would want to do that. I don't know. That seems kind of problematic.
That's a good point. That would make his Quran bad.
Can you guys read this? Okay.
Philemon, yep.
Okay.
No, we can't.
I would challenge you to read that book of the Bible and then run your mouth.
Here's an interesting thing from history. So Christian West, okay, fought a war to abolish slavery in the evil, wicked United States of America fought a war to abolish slavery in 1860. Okay, against Democratic slave owners. Okay, the Republicans won. Okay, but unfortunately, Democrats went into an insurgency after that. But that's beside the point. So we fought a bloody civil war to end slavery in 1860. Now, slavery before that, the English, okay, they had forbidden slave trading slave trading from Africa in like 1830, wasn't it? Something like that, where they forbid the trading of new slaves.
1807. 1807 went into
1807, yeah.
Years after that,
which is ironic because it was King George that forced slavery on the colonies, but that's another story.
Right.
Anyway,
and this is why you had 7 out of the 13 colonies declare or abolish slavery in their colonies just as soon as the Declaration of Independence was signed.
Exactly.
7 out of 13 abolished it right away.
Okay. So pretty much every Western Christian nation had abolished slavery, okay, before 1880. In 1880, due to pressure, okay, on the Ottoman Empire, okay, they said, look, you need to abolish slavery because we're doing it. You guys should do it too for some reason. They never abolished slavery. What they did do is they abolished white slavery, which is running into the Caucasus, into the Slavic countries, and capturing slaves, where we get the modern English word slave from, is the Slavic people. Mm-hmm. They did abolish that. Well, they actually didn't technically abolish it. They just said that only the Caliph, okay, or could order a slave raid, and he just stopped ordering the slave raids in the north. But African slaves were still traded on the open market, okay, in Istanbul and other places up until the end of World War I. As a matter of fact, there's a famous picture, okay, with what's his name? There was Lawrence of Arabia, the sheriff of Mecca, okay, and a couple other people, where they are at the Versailles Treaty Conference. They are at Versailles, and there's this famous picture where the sheriff of Mecca brought his black African slave with him. So slavery was still practiced legally up in the Arab world, in the Muslim Arab world, up until the downfall and destruction of the Ottoman Empire. Now, this does not mean that slavery.
I mean, I think it's still practiced in Mauritania. Honestly speaking, I think it's still practiced in Mauritania.
Yeah, thank you. I was gonna get to that. So legally speaking, in the Ottoman Empire, slavery was still practiced legally in Saudi Arabia up until the late 1960s or early 1960s, when Kennedy famously said, "I know you own slaves. You're going to put an end to this. You're going to stop this now." So they finally put it on the books where slavery was outlawed. But in other Islamic countries, as Issa pointed out, slavery is perfectly legal. As a matter of fact, in northern Sudan, which is the Muslim part of Sudan, they were openly having open-air slave markets up until the 1990s, and they still have it. Okay, you know what I mean? But it's not. It's still kind of. It's kind of secretive. But no, slavery is a part of Islam. You cannot get rid of it. How is she going to get your grievous sins forgiven if you can't free a slave because you don't own slaves? How are you going to get your sins forgiven? Anyway.
Okay, I want to.
And you know when.
Go ahead, Paul.
When the wife of Muhammad frees a slave, Muhammad isn't too nice. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, Eric, please quote me the verse from the Bible. Jesus forbids slavery. Well, Jesus doesn't mention a lot of things. Like Jesus doesn't forbid wife beating. He doesn't say you can't beat your wife. Do you want me to quote a verse where Jesus said you can't beat your wife? Do you want me to do that too? And he does say slaves submit to your masters. This is true, but the type of slavery that existed in Palestine at this time is completely different than the slavery that I'm speaking about right now. And it's completely different from the type of slavery that existed at the time of Muhammad, who you are trying so desperately to take the focus also off of right now. But I'm not going to allow you to do it. The fact of the matter is that your prophet engaged in slavery. He enslaved people. He traded slaves. He owned slaves, and he raped slaves himself and allowed his followers to rape married women who they enslaved, which their right hand possesses. And this has become sunnah, meaning that if you want to own a slave today, there is no law made by man that can supersede the Sharia that enables you to do this. So, and this is number. Hold on, let me look. I think this is number 10 or number 1. This is my number 1 reason why I would never follow Islam or become a Muslim, is because of the abject hypocrisy and dishonesty you have to engage in order to justify your faith. And we're getting to that, trust me. All right. Let's see here. Let's go back to my slideshow. Okay, so like we said, he was an enslaver. And nothing about that, though. No, Aladdin doesn't mention anything about that. Oh, Jesus didn't say, or did he say? Yeah.
Jesus owned slaves.
I don't remember him owning slaves. Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, come on. All right, peaceful. I'm a peaceful man. I believe in peace. I believe that we should all try to live in harmony with one another as much as we possibly can this side of heaven. And we are commanded to love one another just as we love ourselves. We're all required and commanded by Jesus to pray for those who persecute us. And we know this is hard when you have people that hate you so badly that their hatred inculcates itself into your own personal life. But I still do pray for those people who have those feelings for me and towards me. And I do pray that their hearts will no longer be hardened, and that the Spirit of our God will permeate them and show them the true love of Jesus Christ, and that they too will return to the faith of their childhood. But if we also look at Surah 929 and other verses and hadith that are located, and in the Sirah, oh, by the way, that are located in the Quran, you find something that's almost completely the opposite, where you are told to go out and conquer other people. Now, I know we get this westernized version of Islam preached to us by the ilk of CARE, which we're going to talk about, Paul. Make sure you have that article handy. And other spokes idiots that go out there and try to completely marginalize, minimize the plethora of verses that we find in the Quran and also in the Hadith. But also, I would call your attention to the Sharia. If you look at the Sharia, what is the purpose of jihad? And it is to establish the religion, to force people to become Muslims. You do not have a choice in Islam. And when we look at 929 is the quintessential verse where people go to. It says, fight those who do not believe in Allah or in the last day, or believe that Muhammad was their prophet, until you fight them until what? Until they either convert or they become dhimmis. They become second-class citizens, where they are forced to pay the jizya and feel themselves subdued or humbled or humiliated.
But you're only allowed to do that if you are a Christian or a Jew, and they started to allow Zoroastrians, and eventually they allowed polytheists because they got tired of killing them.
Well, and plus there was too much money to be made, because this is when they went into Hindustan, and the slaughter, the absolute slaughter on the Indian subcontinent is just it's unspeakable.
That's still why there's so much hatred today in India against Islam.
Well, they still, and some of the practices that they still do. Okay, I'm not going to get off with India, but yeah, this is where you have a lot of the Hindi people are severely discriminated against and persecuted by a very vocal, but also a very quickly increasing minority of Muslims in India. It's there was a guy in Clubhouse that was from India, and he was talking about this and how they're still allowed in India, where one man can only marry one woman. However, they provide exceptions to Muslim and allow them to continue to marry up to 4 women. And so therefore, the population growth of Muslims in India far exceeds that of the Hindi people. And in doing so, eventually they're going to, again, become a majority population in India. And I would hate to think if that happens and we see the absolute terrorizing of Hindi in some areas of India, what's going to happen if that is allowed to happen across the entire country? And that's the second most populous country on the planet. And it's scary to think that is something that is almost inevitable, that based on current trajectories. Okay, what else do I have here? Oh, verse 98:6. I forgot. Does anybody know what 98:6 says, just off the top of your head?
Yep, compares us that we are worst of creatures, meaning we're even worse than their shaitan.
Yeah, we are the worst of creatures. Christians and Jews. Let me read that directly for you. Because I got into it with one of those guys on, not in Clubhouse, this is a Facebook group or something.
Well, you have recordings here of a couple guys saying that we are worse than pigs.
Yeah. Okay, 98. And let's just give you, I'm going to start at the beginning because the guy wanted to take it completely out of context. And it says, those among the people of the book who disbelieve and the idolaters who have not been freed until the clear proof came to them, and a possible from God reading out hallowed pages containing firm decrees. Verse 4, the people of the book were not divided amongst themselves till after the clear proof had come to them. They were commanded only to serve God with all exclusive faith to him, to be upright and fulfill their devotional obligations, to give zakat, requiring Christians to pay zakat to the mosque. Sounds a little discriminatory to me. I mean, the Allah being the... Anyway, for this is the even way. In verse 6, surely the unbelievers among the people of the book and the idolaters will abide in the fire of hell. So we're going to hell. They are the worst of creatures. So we're going to hell, and we're the worst of creatures. The Allah of the Quran considers Christians to be the worst of creatures, and he's sending us to hell. Now, think about why he's sending us to hell, and we'll get to that here in just because we commit what sin? What's the sin? It begins with S and ends with irk. Exactly.
Irk,
right? Yes.
We shirking, baby. We shirking on the dance floor.
Oh, I mean, that first pillar is all about shirk, but yeah.
Okay, let's jump over to the Quran is a demonstrable lie, number 5. And this is in part what Rad has actually come up with a good idea, is for me to read some of the chapters or sections out of the book that I'm in the process of writing. And I'll admit I haven't done anything to it in the past 5 weeks. I've gotten pretty bad with it.
You are the author of the book.
I know. I'm
the author of the book.
Yeah, I need to just retire. Just call it a day and sit down and nug this thing out. But
I'll say this: that's what we've been doing on Usama's show, is covering the topic of Moses and all the imaginary Fantasyland work of Ibn, the fibber of the Tafsirs. I mean, these Fantasyland
Ibn Farouk
Kathir. He's hilarious. He just makes stuff up. Fantasyland Kathir. I mean, that's he's got more going for him than Disney. So yeah.
He's Danny Davis knows him, right? Danny he's the guy that's down in that park in San Diego. Am I right on this?
Yeah.
Is that the one that you're talking about?
Are you talking about Ibn Farouk?
He wrote the Tafsir, is what I'm saying. And Usama and on Saturday night show, we're just covering Moses and how it's such a mess. all the entire topic of Moses in the Quran is so messed up. It's so lacking in everything, and the tafsirs are just. It's like I still. Ibn Kathir could have been the Disneyland guy. He could have been Walt Disney.
I'm sorry. You said Ibn Kathir, and I thought you were talking about somebody.
Yeah, you were talking about the other guy down in
Yeah, sorry. I didn't hear that right.
That's all right.
I should put my. And okay, all right. So the Quran is a demonstrable lie. And let's go ahead and just do a couple examples.
Rob's got it. Ibn footnote.
Footnote, right? Yeah, that's what. Yeah, because he got caught on it. What was the lie that he got caught on that footnote? Who remembers that?
Oh,
He was saying that all of Allah's messengers are messiahs.
That's right. That's right. And you got a footnote from some book that nobody's ever read, and it has nothing to do with Hadith literature, Sirah literature, or the Quran. Yes, he was a footnote.
And the faker, he lied.
When you try to lie about something, when you lie about something,
he lied about getting stabbed. He lied about footnotes. What else is he going to lie about?
How do you trust this guy? I mean, did they ever find the guy? I mean, where did
No, in fact, I think he's facing charges on that still.
He what?
I think he's facing charges on it too.
Falsely saying that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would hope so.
Oh, I hope so. Yeah, that was total false.
That was there was a statement that he was facing charges at one point, so I'm waiting to find out.
That'll be good.
Okay.
But of course it would be Islamic persecution. Islamophobes are attacking him because he's the victim. He really did get stabbed.
Think about that ketchup incident. That's all we got to think. Ibn footnote and ketchup.
Yeah, that was something else. Okay, so the Quran is a demonstrable lie. It has stories borrowed from pre-existing texts, and we're not talking about stories from the Bible, because a lot of the stories that it pines upon from the Bible, it gets wrong. But we're talking about
incredibly wrong.
Right. We're talking about like the story about the Queen of Sheba. You have 19 separate points of congruity between the story of the Queen of Sheba, which is from the second Targum of Esther, which is the 2nd century document, and the Quran. The Midrash Sanhedrin has over 8 or 9 different points of congruence where it starts talking about if you kill somebody, it's as if you killed the whole world. If you saved one life, you saved the whole. That's stolen right out of the Midrash Sanhedrin, where a Jew wrote that. God didn't write that. A Jew wrote that. The second great treatise of Seth is from the Nag Hammadi library out of
which is not.
It's a 3rd century Gnostic source, and this is where we get Quran 4:157. And this is where I'm going and having a discussion in one of those Facebook groups with a guy I think he's out of India. I think Habib Rashid is out of India, and I pointed that out to him. And then, okay, the second Targum of Esther is the Queen of Sheba story. It also is anachronistic. And we talk about what an anachronism is. An anachronism is placing a person or a thing in a time period in which it could not have existed. For example, saying that George Washington's wife Martha, used Whirlpool washing machines to wash the clothes of his soldiers. Well, Martha probably participated in the cleaning of soldiers' clothes, assisting the army, but she did not have that type of washing machine at her disposal. So therefore, it could be considered an anachronism. Well, we find anachronisms very similar to this in the Quran. We find it's anachronistic in where chainmail. It has David, who lived in the 10th century BC, the 11th century BC, wearing chainmail. Chainmail was not developed until the 5th century BC, the 4th century BC, on a completely different continent. He's only a half a millennia off there. You're having crucifixion during the time of Moses and Joseph. Again, crucifixion was not developed until the 5th century or 4th century BC, and Moses lived 1400, 1450 BC. Joseph lived around 1900 BC. So there he's over 1,000 years off. And then the famous midnight ride on the Barak. What do they call that event where he rides that Pegasus up from Mecca to?
Oh, the riding the flying ass named Barack.
Right. Is that the Mirage? They call it the Mirage, or the?
Oh no, that's his only quote miracle. He rides a flying ass.
Yeah, I know, but what is that? What is that called? That's called the Mirage.
The night journey.
Yeah, the night journey. Okay.
In a dream.
Yeah, so he's riding this Pegasus type animal that we find from Greek mythology up to Jerusalem, to the furthest mosque, and this furthest mosque didn't exist. There was no mosque in Jerusalem.
It was supposed to be a temple. It was supposed to be a temple, a Jewish temple, and he didn't. And the Jewish temple wasn't there.
There's nothing there in 629 or 623, or whenever this was supposed to happen.
There was a church there, but there was no temple. That's what's right. Funny about it.
It wasn't a mosque. So he rides a fictitious horse, flying horse, to a place with a fictitious building, and then goes up to heaven and pretty much copies what Abraham did when praying to God to save Sodom and Gomorrah from fire, getting it down to, if I find 50 righteous people, 40 righteous people, 30 righteous, 10 righteous people, whatever, he gets the prayers down in a very similar
But
fashion.
he was too stupid to do it on his own. Moses had to tell him to do it right.
Right. And plus, why would God tell him to make people pray 50 times a day, knowing that that's impossible? You can't do that and get anything done anyway. I think our God commands us to pray incessantly, to continue to pray, but not have to go through some formalized set of rote prayers, uttering rote prayers, going through all these different type of bowing and, anyway, double down in the story, looking for sympathy. Yeah. Okay. The next one, let's see here. Historically incoherent. Haman is with Pharaoh. Haman is from the book of Esther, which is the 5th century. Pharaoh, in which Haman is supposedly interacting, is at the time of Moses, which is the 15th century BC. It's only 1,000 years off. You have a Samaritan, my error, sorry, on Mount Sinai, where
we were talking about this last week. Yeah.
What's that?
We were just talking about this last week on Usama's show.
Yeah, you have a Samaritan that you have this people group that don't exist until the Jews are removed from the northern kingdom in 721, whereas Mount Sinai is supposed to have occurred around 1450 BC. How do you reconcile that? There again, you have it's historical illiteracy. You have Mary is the sister of Aaron and Moses.
I think that is really way off.
Come on. That's
and they name a chapter of the Quran after the father of Aaron.
Like chapter 19. It's
the father of Moses.
It's mentioned 3 separate times, maybe 4 separate times. I can't remember. But the place that they, when you get in these types of discussions, the place that they always want to run is, I think it's chapter 60, 63 or some 60 something, where it's kind of vague and ambiguous on how the relationship is supposed to be applied. But the place to go if you're going to make this argument and have a discussion is to go to chapter 3 and in Imran. And because that gives Imran's wife, Mary, and the sister of Aaron, and then it has Mary being looked over by a guy by the name of Zacharias. Does that sound a little familiar? Yeah, that sounds very familiar from the gospel. So you have a complete void of a timeline here in the Quran, trying to make Aaron.
So from the retired social studies teacher, retired special ed social studies teacher, I say Allah is chronologically impaired.
Yeah, you get an F. You fail. F for fail. And then let's see, what's this other one? Oh, here we have one. Jews worshipped Ezra as the son of God. This is chapter 530 something, I think, either 530 or 930, somewhere around there, where it mentions that the Christians worship Jesus as the Son of God, and the Jews worship Ezra as the Son of God, or vice versa, how they say it. But you don't find any Jewish group out there that has ever worshipped Ezra in the same sense or in the same way that Christians worship Jesus as the Son of God. So that you have all of these historically incoherent statements being made in the Quran. I don't know how you can reconcile that and still say that the Quran is a miracle. Let me go back over here. Then we get to, what do we got? It's scientifically lab. Okay, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. Stars are missiles, to keep jinn from getting into heaven or into the earth. The sun sets in a muddy pool of water. And it talks about how the human bones are formed, and then the skin is formed on top of them, and then the organs are formed. So it's just crazy.
And don't forget, we come from a clot.
A blood clot, right? Yeah, blood. And then lastly, the chronic understanding of the Trinity is completely incoherent. It has the Trinity as being God the Father, Jesus God the Son, and then Mary as God the Mother. And I spend quite a bit of time explaining that and what the Tasfir have to say about that. They believe the same thing. They believe that the Christians thought that Mary was part of the Trinity. Now, I'm not sure if Ibn Kathir felt that way, but Ibn Abbas, or maybe it was Ibn Kathir and Ibn Abbas felt that way, but Al-Jalalain, I'll have to look. We'll look at that someday. But the fact is that the Islamic understanding of the Christian Trinity is completely incoherent. And I know, the Carolinians, we always hear about this. The Carolinians, this nunnery group out in the middle of the desert, they worship Mary as part of as being God. Well, that's not necessarily true, but the only evidence that we have from that is from an early church father. I want to say Origen, or maybe Eusebius. I think maybe Origen, where he discusses this as far as rectifying their heresy. I'm willing to be wrong on that. If y'all want to,
I believe it is Origin. It's been a long time since I read that, though.
Yeah. So.
And it's like 4 lines. That's it.
Right. Yeah. It's just
and no mention of Mecca, no mention of anything, but there was, whatever. I mean,
or even with that, even if you're going to say that's to say that's much as true, why would you say some of these things in the Quran if it's only just a small sliver of a sect somewhere out in the middle of nowhere?
Allah doesn't know. That's what it comes down to. Allah is clueless.
I would agree with
and
that.
That's the kind of God they serve, a God who's clueless. I'm sorry. It's an awful fact when they can't even get that right.
Okay. Oh, here's the one. Okay. The feigned victimhood while being the bully themselves. Welcome, care. And I'm going to have you read that article here in just a second, Paul. And this is what I just can't stand, is the hypocrisy and the dishonesty that we get when they, especially here in the West, where they try to say that they are the ones that are a persecuted group. And I'll admit, there are people out there that have attacked mosques, maybe put bacon on their door handle. They left a pig's head at one, I believe. But as far as violence being visited upon Muslims here in the United States, if this is so prolific and so pervasive, why do we have so many examples of people pretending to be attacked? People pretending, getting just lack of a better term, Jesse Smolletted, where they go out and they make up these feigned attacks. And then that on the other side, and you flip that thing around and you look at how they purposely discriminate against people who are non-Muslims in all of these other countries across the globe. Adam Seeker, I'm going to bring him up again, can tell you exactly what life as a Christian is like in Pakistan. John Isaac can tell you exactly what life as a Christian is in Egypt. And if you go to any of these other countries and you talk to ex-Muslims who are courageous enough to publicly come out and speak about the conditions for Christians in those countries, they'll tell you the same exact things. The similarities aren't even close. It is like the difference between night and day. So this is not, I am not in any way, shape, or form condoning any type of discriminatory behavior towards Muslims. And I'm not in any way, shape, or form encouraging any type of violent behavior towards Muslims. But what I am saying is the absolute hypocrisy that exists when some things do occur against Muslims in this country is, number one, blown up way out of proportion, which it is supposed to be. But
I'd like to add something. They also, when the crimes go down against them, they do it. They commit the crimes, and some of them have been caught.
I like the one where they in Germany, where they were screaming about some guy tearing up a Quran and putting it in the toilet and using it as toilet paper, and they found out a Muslim did it. They were just screaming Islamophobia.
like I said, this is the Jesse Smollett type syndrome where you find out that it was, the knee-jerk response is to say some Christian extremist did this, some alt-right white nationalist did this. When the fact of the matter is that it turns out to be a member of their own mosque or their own community doing these things. Let's see here. What else do I got? And when we look at how people for 1,400 years of the Christian faith, of the Jewish faith, of the Hindi faith have been terrorized by these armies that swept out of Arabia across North Africa and conquered 2/3 of Christendom before anybody raised a sword during the Crusades, marched eastward into Hindustan and into the Hindu Kush within 100 years and completely decimated entire villages, murdering them and enslaving them. And they did the same thing across North Africa all the way up into France. They went all through Spain. Spain was a Muslim country for 800 years, for crying out loud. And nobody says boo about that. They says, well, they did this in the name of who? They didn't do this in the name of the Pillsbury Doughboy. They did it in the name of their religion. And they carried out these attacks and continued to carry out. And still today, they continue to attack. If you look at Christians and Hindus, we really don't have a lot of problems with each other. There's some differences, that's true, and there might be some type of arguments amongst each other, but there really isn't any violent confrontations. You don't have this between Jews and Buddhists. You don't have this between all these other faith groups that we have in this world. You don't see this amount of conflict that you do when you have Islam. Every culture, every faith group that Islam comes in contact with, there's conflict. And the reason why is because they seek to dominate that religion. They seek to dominate that culture and try to impose upon that culture their own beliefs and force it upon the other culture. Whereas other cultures, and Christians, we proselytize, but we don't physically go out and try to force our faith upon other people. Now, has there been a time that Christians have done this? Yes, there has. I mean, if you look at the colonization of the Native Americans, yes, this is where Christian missionaries have gone out and tried to physically course Native Americans into Christianity. But the difference is we don't do that anymore because we've had a Reformation. We've stepped back and said, hey, maybe that wasn't a good thing to do. Let's not do that, make that mistake again. And we don't. But yet today we see the same thing. Sorry, I just had. Okay. Oh my gosh. Work stuff. But we don't find that. Let's see here. What else do we got here? When we look at the hypocrisy, especially from Hamas and all of the other Israel-hating organizations, when they try to kill Jews across the world and Israel today, and the first place that they run to is run to the media and say, hey, look, the Israelis, they killed this child here. And, think of how horrible and evil they are for killing this child. But what they don't tell you is that the parents took that child out to a violent protest where they knew violence was going to happen. And they knew gunfire was going to occur. And they put their child purposely in the middle of all of that. And then they want the rest of the world to feel sorry for him. Or they start shooting rockets into Israel. That's part of the intro. Connie did a good job of
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, showing
Is they're not saying what they're doing prior, right.
And they're shooting rockets indiscriminately into Israel to purposely terrorize a people group. And then when Israel responds, well, we always caution Israel not to overreact. Well, how would we react if, let's say, Chris Claus and them Canucks up there started launching rockets into Paul Sutliff's backyard?
Oh, no. Okay, we just
Well-
get in our boats, we go across, we kick butt, and then we come back
No.
after having taken Canada.
Not under Biden's. No.
Okay,
with Biden.
we got a whole
We
bunch of
won't
libs here,
harm
but the majority of people in New York State are conservative. We would not put up with it.
I'm just
we
saying,
wouldn't
Biden-
worry about Biden making doing something. No, the people here
Biden
would
would
not
not
put up with it.
send in the tranny troopers.
No, I'm not
just
saying Biden would send in the transgender troops. I'm saying we would go. We wouldn't wait because we're right on the lake.
They would have a militia. This is where we have a militia Second Amendment stuff. They would go up there and they would kick off some Canuck butt.
It's never going to happen.
I'm just using that, of course, we're just using that flippantly. But this is exactly what we would do. We wouldn't take it. And we would expect the rest of the world to, hey, shut your mouths. These people are purposely attacking us, trying to terrorize our own people and killing our own people. And you're telling us, oh, you have to use some caution. Don't you overreact.
That would be it. I mean, that's exactly what would happen because they're so liberal up there. Yeah, most Canadians own guns, but I'll tell you this, it's not the same. It's not the same. It's not their liberalness, and no, it's a total different belief that way. Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. I got to get. We had. I was looking at the time.
Yeah.
And then CARE. I cannot stand CARE. They are the biggest bunch of whinies that you could about imagine. And Paul, you sent me an article today. Put this. Hold on. Let me put this article.
I'm gonna put this in the chat room. There, that link.
Well, I'm going to put it up here on the screen for people to see. Whoops. Why can't we see this? We cannot see this because, let's see here. Let me present.
Okay. It's Hamas link. CARE says no one should take it seriously. This is on Jihad Watch. Came out yesterday by Larry Estevan, and this has me laughing hysterically. And I owe Steve Emerson big. I'm going to have to write him a note saying thank you. And I'll have to figure out how to contact this guy, Larry Estevan, because he has me in stitches.
Okay.
So Steve Emerson.
I'm going to point out, look at here. As a result, a school teacher, let's see, lost her job.
Intihaj Muhammad followers showered Tamar Herman's place of employment. Yeah, right. This is all about a guy who is an Olympic fencer claiming that a woman took off a hijab of one of her students.
Right. Okay.
And it never happened.
Okay. So now when this lawsuit was filed, here's what CARE says. The context is key here. CARE's foundation's role as a staunch advocate for Muslim Americans signals to readers that these underlying statements are not an assertion of objective fact, but expressions of subjective belief and opinion from an advocate's point of view. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because this affects me personally. I have been attacked because of somebody's subjective point of view on how I view Islam. Not an objective point of view, but a subjective point of view. So if ever there is going to be any type of litigation in the future, well, I'm going to go to page 32 of CARE's motion to dismiss and put that in there, because this is the, I mean, when you sit there and say, well, this is this is just our opinion. It's not grounded in fact. And what we said about this lady that ended up in her termination as a teacher, no, that's not going to hold any water. That is not going to be an excuse. And if these people ever come sniffing around here, anyway.
So they even tried to weasel their way out by saying, "Oh, that the stuff they posted on Twitter, nobody really believes what's said on Twitter."
That just boils down to
bad.
It's pure paranoia.
Every time somebody fights Care, I think they win. That's what it comes down to. I'm still laughing over this because they're telling everybody. There's a quote just before. It says, "Subjective views, epithets, rhetorical hyperbole used to express the Care Foundation's deeply held opinion."
Yeah, that's okay. Where does it say that? I forgot to put that up there.
That's just a little bit above the context is key. It's the third paragraph up.
Right. Okay.
That to me is hilarious. Rhetorical hyperbole. I mean, so that's
rhetorical right here.
They are telling everybody, don't believe anything they say. Right. Why would anybody give money to a group that claims to be an advocacy group where you're not supposed to believe anything they say?
Right. Yeah. So it says here, rhetorical hyperbole. Remember, next time Care is on TV calling for someone to be fired because the organization apparently does not actually believe that. It's just venting, and it's not news, and it's not grounded in fact. And then we have over here somebody, don't lie about Hamas and Israel Zionists are killing civilians since 1947. Please come to Palestine and see the truth. I would wonder. I don't
think Al-Adin's been to Palestine.
He says he's from Palestine. I got to take him at his word.
Well,
if I know why.
He might be,
why?
I think he's clueless.
Why? Yeah, I get it. Okay. So, how many Jews live in the Gaza Strip?
None, I don't think.
None. Zero. Zippo.
Right.
If you're a Jew and you're caught in the Gaza Strip, you know what they're going to do to you? They're going to kill you. They're going to capture you. They're going to arrest you, capture you, whatever, torture you, and then eventually kill you. And this is why Jews don't go into the Gaza Strip. So to sit there and say that, they don't lie about Hamas, Israel Zionists are killing civilian Palestinians since 1947. What have the Palestinians been doing to the Jews? What happened in
wait in 1947? What was that war that happened?
Right. Yeah. What was that all about? I mean, you had
who started that war?
Them,
and you know what? There were no Palestinians then.
Go away. Yeah. Oh, Jenin
they all ran away. They all left.
Look at here. Look at here. The Jenin village. That turned out to be a lie. Did you know that, Al-Adin? Did you know that was a lie? That was not true. Of course you did not. This is the type of stuff. This is exactly why I would never embrace this faith. It's because you have people like this that are willing to say these things, be dishonest as the day is long, trying to make an assertion. Please post the stream link. I'm Palestinian. I'm from Jenin. Yeah.
I don't think he's trying. Like I've said before, he's not cognitively ready to debate. He's just he's so clueless. It takes a while for him to catch up. So it's not worth your time.
Let me see if I can.
Let's keep going. This is good.
All right. Where am I?
He just wants to. He wants to be to be the entertainment. That's the only reason he bothers.
He's a piece of work, that's for sure. Let's see here. Where am I?
I'm still waiting for Palestine. I'm still waiting for the country of Palestine to exist. It doesn't exist right now. So you can say you're from Palestine, but the truth is you don't have a passport from Palestine because it doesn't exist.
Okay, where are we? All right. Okay, the constant threats from those who profess to be pious examples of virtue, all the while their lives are okay, so this is the people who threaten your life for speaking out against this. So I'm telling the truth about it. And then they threaten your life, your livelihood, and those around you all the while, and then they try to come across as these pious individuals of virtue. All the while, you look at their lives; they're littered with nothing but histories of violence, crime, and vice. So again, I cannot stand the abject hypocrisy that we get from that. So to engage in this Western Muslim is abject denial and dishonest portrayal of what their own scholars teach, but also includes threats to those who expose them for what they are. Okay. Science, historical method. We got to go fast, folks. All right. So the Bible has been demonstrated historical document anyway to be extremely accurate and reliable. When we look at the archaeological evidence for the Bible, for example, the cities of Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Nazareth, Mount Carmel, the ruins of Sennacherib's palace, halfway across the sands of Arabia, up in outside of Babylon. Or it's where is it? It's in Mosul. It's in Nineveh. It's right. It's in Nineveh. They've been discovered. They've been excavated. We can find these things. Hezekiah's tunnel. We found these things that predate Christ by half a millennia. They're there. We found them. We've proven what they are. Mecca, and this is what I'm going to continue to hammer on this. This is supposed to be a city that's existed since 4,000 years, 2000 BC. Ishmael and Abraham it's in the Kaaba, or in the Quran, was supposed to have built the Kaaba. And if this city has had a continuous population, even if it hasn't had a continuous population, there is still no evidence of its existence prior to the 7th century. If there is evidence of its existence prior to the 7th century, all I would ask is that you post it in chat or volunteer to come up on stream and tell us what evidence that you have to show that Mecca existed in the 7th century. The fact of the matter is this is a black hole, and it is a fairy tale. This is history being redacted upon a story by not the Umayyad, the Abbasids. I believe it's the Abbasids. It might even be after the Abbasids. But the fact is that it's ahistorical. There's no historical evidence for the existence of Mecca in the 7th century. If there is, please bring it. And if there's not, then why are you following and reading this book? Okay. What is he saying here? Somebody, well, no, don't mute him, because he'll sit there and cry as a martyr, saying, "Oh, they muted me. They kicked me out."
He can't cry if he's muted because he has no voice. That's his only thing. Is he wants to have a voice.
Let him go. Let him
Aladdin, do you have any Muslim friends that are smarter than you? Please invite them to the show. Thank you.
Okay. So when we look at Mecca itself, there's no manuscript evidence for it. There's no maps demonstrating that it existed. There's no inscriptions. And here, what we talk about the inscriptions, when people would go to Jerusalem, Jews would make pilgrimages to Jerusalem. They would write the reason for their journeys on rocks. And we can read these inscriptions and date them clear back to the 3rd, 4th, 5th century that we find all over the country of Israel. You would expect to find the same type of inscriptions on rocks if people were making Hajj to Mecca. If there was in fact this annual pilgrimage that everybody that would make, whether or not they were Muslims or not, but if they were, they said there were supposed to be 360 gods in the Kaaba. Prior to this, you usually have people of 360 different faiths making their pilgrimage to Mecca. Where do we find that? Where are those inscriptions? Where are those rock inscriptions? Where are the roads that led into Mecca? Where is anybody discussing? Where's the literature that anybody discusses this? Where's the folklore that we would expect to see? Where's the writings of people even mentioning the existence of Mecca? There's none. Zero. You know why? Because it didn't exist. That's why. And if it doesn't exist, then this faith system is not true. It can't be true. And you're facing the direction 5 times a day of a place that did not exist in the 7th century. And to say that, now let me just make sure that people don't think I'm just some cold-hearted, grumpy old man here. My heart bleeds for people like that. It really does. If you place your faith, trust, and confidence in your life into practicing this 5 times a day. That the discipline that it takes to go to a mosque 5 times a day. You know, you have to respect that. You have to respect the people's discipline to do that 5 times a day.
Thank you. That's a very nice thing to say. I think that's important that you're saying that.
Well, yeah, and well, it's how I feel. You know, I'm, like I said, I'm just not this cold-hearted curmudgeon here, but my heart bleeds for these people because they've placed so much faith and confidence in this that they are going to fight tooth and nail to destroy whoever brings up the truth about this.
Well, could you imagine? Okay, could you imagine if you believed that Superman was real all your life, that you believed in this Superman, this superhero, and then all of a sudden, people were telling you that no, this Superman is really a villain? How would you react to that? You know,
I would feel horrible.
Well, violently. Yeah, you would be in total denial. You would react violently to it. There's funny scenes from, remember the cartoon days, or no, who was that Dutch politician, not the female, the other guy, Jans, or yeah. Remember when he came to the UK back in like the 2000s, and there was these radical Muslims out there saying that I remember there's this one guy, and he's saying, yes, we are out here to protest Gert Sater because he's saying Islam is violent. And what would you do with him? We will kill him for saying Islam is violent. It's like, dude, you're just kind of proving the point. But no, this would be a horrible thing. I mean, dude, think about this. We believe that Jesus Christ, okay, is basically the perfect human because he is the God man. Well, what all of a sudden if it came out that no, or somehow, you know, that Jesus Christ wasn't. He was a whoremonger. He was all this stuff. He was basically David Koresh. You know, how, you know, we'd be like, screw you, you know what I mean? Even though all the documents, you know, say that he was. Well, of course they don't, but do you know what I mean? You would have to. The miracle of reinterpretation, or just deny your original sources, or just, you know, just basically invent your own Islam, you know, because it's supernatural, because you can't be a Christian because God has said no. Flat out, no. Anyway, that's my thoughts, my opinion.
Well,
Sorry, my Calvinism is coming.
I would draw and make it analogous with King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, and you know, it's such a great story, and there's, you know, so many things to it of legend and lore, and then to find out, well, it's not true. You mean they didn't have a round table? What?
I will kill you. I will kill you for saying that's not true. How dare you?
And that's the type of and that's the type of reply that you would get. It's the King Arthur and Guinevere and who's the
Lancelot.
Lancelot. Yeah. I posted and you refused. Okay, Aladdin, just go away. You're boring. Violence is killing innocent Jesus on the cross in a barbaric way.
That's true.
Yeah,
that is true. That's not false. I don't think any Christian would say that that's not a barbaric, horrible act. You know, I don't think Christians would be like, oh, it's good that Jesus was on the cross. I think if we use the Christian theology is he goes on the cross to expiate the sins of all humanity. That's the act is not a beautiful act. It's a horrendous act that brings, you know, redemption. That horrible act has to occur for the redemption to occur. So I think it's a misunderstanding of Christian theology.
It is a misunderstanding of Christian theology.
Well, it's also a demonstration of cognitive delay because he's asking for something that has already been discussed and he's responding 20, 30 minutes later.
Well, do you think that he actually... Okay, I'm not going to make him the topic of discussion here. I mean, if you think that Christians view this, the barbaric scourging and crucifixion of Jesus Christ as something to embrace, we don't. But what we do embrace is what the ultimate outcome of that is, and that is his sacrificial atonement for our sins. See, this is what you want to leave out, purposely leave out, oh, by the way, whether it's out of dishonesty, which I think it is, it's just abject dishonesty on your part, which goes back to what I was just saying two slides ago, is the hypocrisy and the abject dishonesty that people have to exercise in order to try to engage Christians in any type of discussion. And so if you want to keep on posting and chat, you can go on ahead, but I'm going to just ignore you. All right.
I'll say this, if you're responding to something, it's something that was said 20, 30 minutes ago. I don't expect him to get any quicker.
This is distraction. Very good. Exactly. Okay. Number 2, Muhammad. Muhammad. I mean, you can't get past this. This is supposed to be the prophet of Islam, and there's just no way in Haiti.
He's not a prophet. There's nothing in the Quran that says he was a prophet.
But this is what they call him. Peace and blessings be upon him, the prophet of Israel, whatever. So this is the guy we went over last week. We showed where he had people killed for criticizing him. What type of prophet has people killed for criticizing?
Cowardly man, because he can't do it himself either.
Let's go to it wasn't Ezekiel. Who was oh, it doesn't matter. The guy had a bear eat the kids that were mocking him. Who was which?
Oh, I think it was Elijah.
Elisha.
Yeah, Elisha.
Not Elijah. Elisha. Okay, I know. Elisha had people get. Shut up. Did he criticize?
He called on God. God dealt with it. He didn't have to do it.
Exactly. Right. He enslaved people, so he's an enslaver. Dealt heavily in slave, and that slave trade. Oh, by the way, that slave trade that he set the example to Sunnah for resulted in over 18 million people being transported off of the African continent eastward into Arabia.
And most of them died.
Yeah, 90% of them died along the way. Of those who went, 2 out of every 3 were women, and those women who bore children. This is why we don't find any remnants of their race in Arabia anymore, is because if they bore children, their children were killed. So, yeah. Anyway, let's go on. This is why I would never, because in slavery there, allowed for women to be raped, and he raped women himself. Mary the Cop, thank you very much. Married and divorced wife of his adopted son, and then there's supposed to be a T there. Sorry, not hen. And then he abolished adoption. Of course, he commits adultery. And, oh, by the way, after he commits adultery, if you remember the story of him and Mary the Cop getting caught in Hafsa in her bed, he says, I promise I don't tell Aisha. I promise not to do it again. And then he gets some type of revelation later on. Well, why do you promise these things to your wives when you can just replace them?
66:1. We're on 66:1.
Yeah, so he gets this revelation where it's okay to lie to your wife and commit adultery. What kind of prophet is that? What kind of man does that? Well,
a disgusting, filthy beast.
That's mankind, clearly the best of mankind.
Okay, what else we got here? Oh yes, Aisha. Now this one, I cannot ever get past this. How can you ever say? And this is, again, you get in these rooms and on Facebook and you start having these conversations with people, or even getting in social media and having conversations with these people. How can you ever begin a conversation with a human being that believes that it is okay, it is sunnah for a 53-year-old man, under any circumstance, for a 53-year-old man to marry and consummate this marriage with a 9-year-old prepubescent girl?
Well, he married her when he was 6 and did other things till she was 9.
Okay,
that's the other point there.
The dying part. Yeah, I get that. But not only did he do that to her, but he continued to do that. That's what I can't get past. He continued to do this until she was 18 years old. All the time she's going through her developmental stages, all the way up until she's just a very young woman at the age of 18. He continued to do this to her. The pedophilic nature of this would land him in prison alone here and make him one of the most targeted people in our prison systems today because of this. But to try to justify it, and to see people try to justify this, just makes your stomach, it just it turns it inside and out. Men are supposed to be protectors of women and little girls, not to take advantage of them. And when you see the justification, oh, well, Rebecca was 3 when Isaac married her. Mary was 12 when Joseph was 9. Shut your mouth.
Prove it.
Well, they can't using.
They can't.
In Rebecca, it was we were the first 3-year-old that can, feed entire or water entire camel herds. Okay, and she's called a young woman. But this is the mindset that this causes in among this community where they try.
You have to throw our brain out to read anything, Rick. Let's go back to that mindset. That's why they don't have that. I mean,
yeah, we ain't throwing out our brain.
Yeah.
We aren't going to do it. We're going to expose darkness so that they'll see the light and come to Christ Jesus.
They actually get the Rebecca thing from Rashi, Jewish commentator. Rashi, that's his interpretation. I'm not making that up. You can go to Chabad.org and get his commentary on that, and it actually says she was 3 years old, doing all that stuff. It was a miracle of God.
Well, they do a bunch of math with when the death of Sarah. How old was Sarah when she had Isaac, and then her death, and they do some. And I get that how he arrives at that number, but that's not a biblical approach to it. It's not the biblical approach to it is to look at how does God and Moses describe Rebecca. And
well, the thing about Rashi is he was rejected. He was even rejected by his own son, who was another great rabbi. He was completely rejected because of his weird interpretations. Actually, rewriting the Bible. That's how the modern Jewish Bible today, the Masoretic text. That's how they get for Isaiah 9:5 or 9:6, depending on how you number it. Where in the Jewish interpretation it says, the wonderful name, the mighty counselor. Blah blah blah, called the son Emmanuel or whatever. In other words, it completely changes the wording. But that's not the only place he did it. He did it in numerous other places. Something with Shiloh, I forget. But either way, that's where they get that from. These anti-Christian. This is Rashiism. He's very much anti-Christianity, anti-Christ, in his interpretation. By the way, I'm sorry, continue on, because I do actually want to get to why I am not a Muslim, but go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. And also, let me just say that they'll cite like colonial, in colonial America, the minimum age for marriage was 7 years old, yada, yada. And that's fine. You can go ahead, but that was for contractual purposes. And it wasn't some 53-year-old scumbag trying to crawl on top of a little girl.
No, it was another 7-year-old.
Right. Yeah. Fathers would defend their children against 53-year-old scumbags.
Oh, they would shoot them.
Right. You would hang them. You would torture them. And to think that, and this is something that's just not natural. I pointed this out on previous shows. For a man to have those types of attractions and to be able to sexually perform in the presence of a child, you're sick. You're a sick individual. You're a sick human being, and you need help. Your example is not to be followed. You need help. And those people who actually believe that, you need just as much help, if not more, because you know better. You have a sense of morality that is higher than his. And the reason why you have that sense of morality is because God has written that on your heart. To know that is wrong and to try to justify that is even more wrong. Well, I don't know if it's even more wrong, but it's pretty bad. All right. Let's go to the last one. And number one, shirk. Committing shirk. Joining partners with God. Why is this my number one reason? Well, number one, Jesus was crucified. This is a historical fact. You cannot get around the historicity, of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. It is as factual as you can possibly get when asserting facts from antiquity. It has over 15 different places of attestation, and there is no peer-reviewed journal out there in any theological journal that says that Jesus died any other way. He was crucified. And so to say that Jesus was not crucified, well, in 4:157, it says that he was not crucified. Now, what they do say, according to the Tasphere, and the Quran, they do say that somebody else was crucified or his image was placed on somebody else. That person was crucified. It wasn't Jesus. Now, what this did is it causes Jesus or Christians to think that Jesus was God. Why? Because Jesus rose from the dead. But God, who is omniscient, would know that Christianity would grow out of this and be a religious group, over 2 billion people, 2 billion souls that would
Far more than Muslims.
join partners with God, commit shirk, make Jesus God. Allah would know this if he is to be omniscient. So Allah puts an image on somebody else, having somebody else be crucified, causes us to commit shirk. So what they want us to believe, what we're to believe, is that he would be a malevolent being. Only a malevolent being would cause people to do this purposely, knowing that this would happen. And I would never bow a knee ever to somebody that would do that, to cause even if I wasn't a Christian, that would cause the condemnation of billions of souls because of what you did back in the first century. No, sir, not ever going to happen. So those are my top 10 reasons why I'm not a Muslim.
All right, I only got two. Sorry, go ahead.
There's just one more point to that shirk thing. The Muslim or Islamic Shahada includes Muhammad with Allah, so they're committing shirk and don't even know it.
Yeah,
dude, that word "and" is the fact that they put the word "and" in there. I know it's a letter creation, but it's their fault. I mean, if they didn't, they're including. You can't have one and not the other when you use the word "and."
Well,
yeah.
he was illiterate, so
Sharia obeys Allah and his messenger. Yeah, it's also.
Or better yet, they say the lawgiver is Allah or Muhammad.
Yeah, well, no, that's the thing that they because Muhammad didn't understand. Well, he was illiterate. I love that. We have an illiterate prophet, so therefore you must follow him. No, this is totally completely ridiculous. But now here are my two reasons why I am not a Muslim. This is coming. First part is John 10, verses 11 through 18. There's more to it, but this pretty much sums it up. Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. That is a divine name, or the divine title. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the good shepherd and does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolves attack the flock and scatter it. The man runs away because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. Again, he states it again, I am the good shepherd. Remember, these are divine titles. I know my sheep and my sheep know me. Right there, boom. I know my sheep and my sheep know me. Just as the Father knows me and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that are not in the sheep pen, but I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice. Again, right there, they will too will listen to my voice. We listen to the good shepherd. Muhammad is not the good shepherd. We do not listen to his voice. Okay? I do not hear his voice. I do not see the voice of God in anything of the Quran because he is not the good shepherd. Let me continue on. Oh, they too will listen to my voice, and there will be one flock and one shepherd. The reason my Father loves me is that I lay down my life only to take it up again. Something again Muhammad or no other prophet did. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have what? The authority to lay it down and the authority to take it up again. This command I received from my Father. So there's a few points in this, as I've already stated. He is the good shepherd. That is a divine title. We are his sheep. We know his voice. We can discern between the voice of man and the voice of the hired hand, the one that will run away, okay, when the wolves come to attack, okay? We hear that voice. Why? Because we are of his flock, period. That is why when I read the Quran, I'm rejected by it. I'm repulsed by it, okay, to claim that this is the word of God. But another verse that I want to bring up is John 6:68. Okay. Now, just as you guys know, this is the background where Jesus feeds the 5,000 or 10,000, I forget which, right? Okay. They've all seen this miracle. Okay. They've all witnessed it. And they come up to him, and Jesus lays it down to them. And he says blasphemous, horrible things to them. What does he say? He says, I tell you the truth. No one can have eternal life, or no one can come to God, okay, unless he drinks the blood of man and eats the flesh of the Son of Man. That's what it is. Drinks the blood and eats the flesh of the Son of Man. And they seriously say, is this man talking that we are to eat him? Okay, no, he is talking cannibalism. This is repulsive to first century Jews. So he rebukes them and he sends them out because he says, you have not come here because to hear the words of life or the words of salvation or whatever. I'm paraphrasing here. But instead you came because your bellies were full. So I tell you the truth. Unless you eat and drink, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you shall not have eternal life. And he says it 3 times, and each time he builds on it. He says it much more repulsive, much more, you know what I mean? And he drives them away, and they all scatter. And then finally, and this is the verse I wanted to highlight, he says, and what about you? He says to the 12, Peter replied, Master, to whom would we go? You have the words of real life, of eternal life. We've already committed ourselves, confident that you are the Holy One of God. I read from a weird translation there, but anyway, you get the point. Let's go with the King James, the KJV. Then Simon Peter answered him, Lord, to whom shall we go? Thou hast the words of eternal life. In the ESV, Simon Peter answered him, Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. And that is why I am not a Muslim. That is why
Amen.
I reject anything of this false prophet.
I was going to play a video when we were talking about the treatment of women, and now that I was supposed to, I forgot about it, but we were talking about how, they're so merciful to women, and you get those apologists. And this is when I hear that, this is what I see when I hear this. Oops. Am I not merciful? Am I not merciful?
Wow, that's Allah Gabriel in the cave right there, dude. You nailed it. You finally captured it. We have proof positive. Can't hear you there, Eric.
I know. I'm sorry. I had myself muted. I didn't want it to get feedback and stuff. But when I think about how women are treated, this is all I see. And you don't want to relegate this to something from a movie, but this is the treatment of women in not here in the West. I mean, you got the little Linda Sarsours and those people that try to defend Islam, but for the women that live actually in the Pakistans, the Afghanistans, where they are treated as nothing but second-class citizens and relegated to that. Okay, so I'm late for church. I'm going to get thrown out. I know it. Again, thank you. Again, we had a lot of people in the chat tonight. Thank you so much for coming. Even Aladdin, I appreciate him coming and trying to stir things up, and that's always fine. If we can sit here and talk, and some days you feel like you're in an echo chamber, and it's nice to have some people I don't know if we could say that he's the one that's keeping us honest, but it's always good to have dissenting voices. Does anybody have anything that they want to add before we hit the road? Anything important?
If any of this it makes you question your belief in Islam, I'd say fall on your knees or just stand up and ask the Lord Jesus to make himself personally known to you.
Amen.
Take that chance.
Amen. Amen. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and we will see you next Sunday. Are we here next Sunday? Yes, we are here next Sunday on the Crossing the Crescent discussion group. God bless you, and we will see you all. Oh, I forgot. Hold on. I know. What the heck was that? What am I doing?
Advanced student and specialist, that the standard narrative has holes. That's what I'm.
That's all, folks.